safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington's 7th Congressional District, ranking member of the House Judiciary Immigration Subcommittee, Chair Emerita, the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We'll be talking about immigration, Democrats, Republicans, the whole deal. Also on the program today, Pete Hegseth on the hot seat, but claims that Jesus is his co-pilot.
Oh.
DOJ report on Trump January 6th actions released. Evidence was enough to convict were it not for the election. Apparently, the FBI has not even spoken with Pete Hegseth's ex-wife, despite her repeated attempts to do so, indicative of the FBI background check on Pete Hegseth. But, with that said, sometimes if you don't want to know the answer, don't ask the question.
Right.
China discusses sale of TikTok to Elon Musk.
That's way worse.
Republicans want to condition aid to California as wildfires continue to burn. Senate advances the Laken Riley reactionary immigration bill. Biden announces more student debt relief for 150,000 borrowers. FTC preps a suit against a massive apartment rental company. Hamas accepts a draft for a ceasefire. Biden names a warship after a war criminal. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Of course, I was referring to George W. Bush. I mean, arguably, also when he named it after Clinton, also a war criminal, and also Bob Kerrey. Many of you may be too young to remember Bob Kerrey, senator from Nebraska, then went on to be the president of the New School. Was he the My Lai massacre that he was involved in? Or I'm not sure which undoubted war crime in Vietnam he was associated with. I think he admitted his involvement. And I don't know if, had he admitted his involvement, whether that would be enough for people to sort of just let him be in public. But I gotta believe the threshold should be higher to name anything after anybody. I mean, there is a reason why over the past 4, 5, 6 years, people have wanted to take down Confederate statues to change the names of military bases, or for that matter, anything that had been named after Confederate soldiers. And part of the reason, or a significant part of the reason, I think, is because these statues, these namings, much of which, incidentally, took place in the 1910s and 20s, as there was a resurgence of racism, and a Klansmen in this country Approximately 6% of America were card-carrying Klan members at that time. 6 million. It was anticipated or estimated around 100 million folks in this country. And as they were attempting to push the lost cause, this basically propaganda about what the Civil War was about, they created these statues in the names of Confederate generals and leaders as a way of influencing the way the Civil War was perceived by the citizenry.
Gilding their own history.
Indeed. And fortunately, we had a revision of that history in the 1980s led by Eric Foner, and we understand the Civil War. It's being taught more, and there's a better sense of it, within the conventional wisdom of what it was about. Spoiler alert, it was about owning free labor. And, but when Joe Biden names a ship after George W. Bush, who, and I'm sure Joe Biden's on record saying it at different times, maybe he's not, but the vast majority of Americans came to understand that George Bush had lied us into the Iraq War as a nation. And I do mean lied, because they said that they had evidence, and they believed 100% sureness that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And that's a lie, because there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And so therefore they couldn't have had such evidence. And that's the most generous take on all that. You don't want to get me started, but that's the most generous one. And depending on whose numbers you want to believe, you can start with the Defense Department of the United States, and you can go to more reputable sources for calculating such things. But anywhere from several 100,000 to over 1 million innocent people were killed because of it. 3 million internal and 3 million external refugees. A destabilization of the country. Perhaps an empowerment of Iran that's going to lead to future deaths. Certainly the birth of ISIS. I mean, we could go on and on about the implications of that war of choice. Thousands of American lives, trillions of dollars. And Joe Biden has basically just planted his flag in attempting to change history or to reevaluate, reassess history by honoring George W. Bush.
At the beginning. I mean,
he supported it at the beginning, without a doubt. And he also had a cockamamie plan to split it into 3. But the point is that now we're 25 years later, 22 years later, and in the interim between supporting the war and where he is today, the Democratic Party at least acknowledged, and I would imagine Joe Biden did, that war was a disaster, and and I'm sure Joe Biden at one point said his vote was a function of getting misinformation from the administration. And again, I'm being very generous in my characterization of all of this. And so in doing this, it is it's an offense to really just about everybody. And I mean, never mind the politics of it. It is never mind the fact that we never held George Bush accountable for the torture, for the war of choice, for letting bin Laden go, for all of it. The idea that now he's being honored, it's just sick and twisted.
Well, happy Newsday Tuesday to everyone involved, everyone tuning in. But, that was news. The Biden administration is making that choice. They also made the choice and Harris, by extension, in the campaign with the Cheneys. I mean, This is a big...
The day after Trump gets to be peacemaker with regards to Gaza.
Right. We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that.
But
unclear.
I mean, I think the situation is immensely clear, though, and it should have been clear to the Biden administration that this was Netanyahu's game plan.
Oh, I'm convinced that Biden got exactly what he wanted out of all of this.
Well, he didn't want the ceasefire. If you
Trump wanted one, he didn't.
If you were earnestly pursuing a ceasefire, you would have used the leverage at your disposal, which are United States weapons. And as Biden leaves office, they are sending $8 billion in more arms to Israel, and Trump gets to look like he's the deal maker. And in exchange, I think he's that there will be further immiseration of the Palestinian people. I don't think that this is the kind of thing where Trump wouldn't pick Elise Stefanik for UN ambassador. He wouldn't pick Mike Huckabee, a messianic Christian Zionist, to be his ambassador to Israel. He wouldn't pick Pete Hegseth. We'll get to that in a second. A Christian nationalist as well for his defense secretary, if this wasn't his, or Marco Rubio, a total hawk on this issue, if he wasn't going to be hawkish towards the Middle East. But it does show how much of a failure Biden's lack of seemingly I don't even know. We'll get.
Well, we got to get to because we get this. This is a deeper story.
Well, okay.
Because
that was yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, you can either assess one of two things happened. Trump exerted his will, or Trump made a deal and said, this is the way it's going to go. And this deal was made 6 months ago. And the rest is just a sort of a theater, which is my sense of it. But we will talk that a bit. In the meantime, you mentioned Pete Hegseth. Mm-hmm. Did I even introduce you at the beginning of the thing?
No.
Oh.
That's Emma Vigeland, everybody.
Emma Vigeland.
I mean, not to nitpick, but we spent 10 minutes on Trump putting the Bush name on the carrier.
Biden, yeah.
They should have called it Bodie McBoatface, but anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. I
It's
got a
okay.
little sidetracked. That's all right. We pre-recorded the. I think that's what it was.
Jayapal interview.
Yeah, when I know that we don't have to rush to get to the guest, then all of a sudden it's like all of my constraints unchained. And that's the way it's going to be now. I'm unchained. I'm tired of the constraints that have been imposed upon me.
Yeah.
Calling everybody a Nazi now. I saw a video. Well, never mind. Okay. Look.
All right, we're here.
All right. Folks, so Pete Hegseth is in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'll give you a quick rundown. The what's his face? Jack Reed came out. Is that his name? Jack Reed? Jack Reed from Rhode Island came out pretty strong in his opening statements. Okay. This is what you would call, and this is appropriate with the defense, the Secretary of Defense, a target-rich
Environment.
Environment. Yes. Pete Hegseth. Let's just put aside a second all of the sexual assault accusations against him. And let's just put aside the all the drinking things. Now, I'm old enough to remember when John Tower, who was a former senator, went up for Secretary of Defense, and all the guys in the Senate were like, listen, we're all problem drinkers, but this guy, and he couldn't move forward because of his drinking and womanizing. But that was back in the olden days where people used to care about that. But Pete Hegseth was a CEO of 2 nonprofits and managed to, I want to say double their budgets, but what I meant to say is the deficit that he ran was double the budget.
Right.
In at least one instance.
And one of them
and
was
these
a
are
Koch,
tiny.
Koch brother funded nonprofit, which is just hilarious if you know the history of the Koch brothers and how they used the deficit for their austerity and, tax cut agenda items during the Obama administration.
But he is so, we're talking about rank incompetence of I would be concerned to hire that guy to run our budget here. And, but he's going to be doing the biggest entity, the entity with the biggest budget in the world. I mean, not a country, but countries aren't just run by one single budget person. There's a whole team of people. across different departments, the biggest single agency in the world in terms of dollars. And, but in his favor, I've talked about the negative. He ran 2 small nonprofits briefly, was fired in both instances because of incompetence. He has been and continues to be a host on the weekend Fox and Friends show.
That's interesting.
And doing this job, I know it qualifies you for just about any other job. I can tell you right now, I could go out. I mean, because I do this 5 days a week. You do this 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
That means you could do 5 times the size of the Defense Department.
That's how it works.
That's how it works. But Jack Reed did well. Kristen Gillibrand, I would skip. She was
Blumenthal skip.
Blumenthal,
Maisie Hirono, pretty good.
Maisie Hirono, pretty good. But so far, Kane, I can't even remember his name.
Tim Kaine in the membrane of Virginia.
Of Virginia, the former vice presidential nominee of Hillary Clinton. He did quite well. Was he a former prosecutor? Because it really felt like it. This is a clip of Tim Kaine going at Pete Hegseth. We're just going to play, I don't know, a part of his 8-minute questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk. I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you were completely cleared?
Now pause it for a second, okay? Because, now listen, I want to make a couple of things clear. I think if you are the Secretary of Defense, you have a questionable morality as it is, right? I mean, your job is to go out and ultimately kill a lot of people. And you know that that's going to involve completely innocent people and children. These hearings are not for people like me who believe such a thing. And I will also say that, like, Pete Hegseth is going to invoke Jesus because, and I can't remember the story. I'm not Christian, but I feel like Jesus also was involved in some hanky-panky, wasn't he? Or something like that, or? Not
clear, but he's basically telling everybody that Jesus has forgiven him. And I guess we have to take his word on that.
Okay, now we're gonna go back a little bit so you can hear this, because Hegseth, of course, is very defensive about the rape allegation against him, where the woman he paid money to drop the case against him. And I just want to put this little bug in your ear as you listen to Tim Kaine. Hegseth is cheating on his second wife, and I'm not sure if he cheated on his first wife with his second wife. I'm not sure about that, so I'll leave that open. He's cheating on his second wife with the mother of his new child. And 2 months later, he is accused of rape and says, no, it was consensual. And just a reminder, this is at a conservative conference. There was a woman who was assigned to him to make sure that he did not end up in a gutter drinking himself blind, because apparently that was a problem that people were aware of. And so she helped him to his room, and according to her friend who knew this story, this woman appears to have been roofied and had no idea.
She told the nurse.
She told the
nurse that she thought she could have been roofied.
Exactly. And but according to Hegseth, it was consensual sex. Oh, incidentally, her husband and her child were in the same hotel, and she couldn't find them the next morning because she was so out of it.
And in the police report, it's alleged that he took her phone and blocked the door.
Now, look, Hegseth's story must be something to the effect of like she made up this story to justify where she was last minute because she had no plan when she decided to hook up with me with her husband and her kid in the house. And I'm so in the hotel.
You know how these hoes lie.
Yeah, I'm so compelling that she couldn't wait to have sex with me at another time, even though she was clearly so interested in this, that she had to do it while her husband and her child were in the same hotel. She couldn't help herself. So she came up with this elaborate whole hoax, and then she ended up making money off it, which is the way that they roll. But Kane's point is like, wait a second. You were married, you cheated on your wife, had a kid, and then as the kid is 2 months old, you're cheating on her again, according to the best case scenario for your testimony. And Kane's saying this like it's a bad thing. But nobody's thinking, here's a guy who knows how to multitask. This is a big job. Here's a guy who needs to multitask. I got a lot of different fires, a lot of little different things in the fire. But Kane has his perspective on it.
And to be clear, 5 affairs during his first marriage was reported.
Okay, that we know of.
How long was he married?
Hey, you can count those on one hand.
Okay,
it's not a two-hander.
Listen, I'm a product of divorce. I've been divorced. I know that couples have troubles, and he's just
a lot of time on his hands.
He's got a lot of time on his hands, and he spends a lot of time at home, I guess. Go ahead.
That occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you were completely cleared? How is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth. And she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges. Well, no, fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything.
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
how do you explain your judgment?
Completely false charges against me. You fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So you
talking about a hypothetical.
So you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, I'm not a perfect person. I'm not claiming to be.
But no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife.
Pause it. I just want to just drop in here because I love that line. I'm not a perfect person. I'm slightly flawed.
Put me in charge of it.
I am slightly flawed.
Right.
12 affairs that we know of and a confusion over a rape charge and the drinking. I am slightly flawed. I'm not perfect.
Jane Mayer this morning of The New Yorker reported that he on a weekday had 3 gin and tonics at breakfast, according to somebody that was having breakfast with him.
I love the fact that, like, it's a weekday
yes.
as opposed to like, okay, I got news for you on the weekend. That's also
look. Hey, I've had mimosas for brunch and things like that, but 3 gin and tonic, not for brunch. A weekday breakfast, that's something else there.
Hey, it's basically last call because he's going to put down the bottle after this.
Yeah.
That's right. He's promised no more booze on the job if he gets this position. Incidentally, the second wife, and I know this gets confusing. All right. The second wife, with whom he cheated on with the third wife, no, with whom he cheated on with the third wife, not to be confused with the woman who charged him with rape and then dropped that charge, who he cheated with, according to him, 2 months after birthing his third wife's, but not quite a wife at that time. She was still a mistress with the second wife. The second wife,
the Glenn Beck white part out here,
is the one who Pete Hegseth's mom wrote an email to Pete Hegseth about, saying that you are a horrible person. You've always treated women horribly, abusive. There's nothing that can be done. God, I'm embarrassed for you. I love you, but God, you're really a bad person. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And then later said that was a mistake. My husband always tells me you should always, you get too emotional and you shouldn't respond to that. That woman who the mother was defending against her own son, that woman, according to the New York Times, investigators reached out to Samantha Hegseth's second wife, the couple married. FBI investigators had initial perfunctory conversation with her on January 8th. This is according to people familiar with or apprised of the report. Hegseth then made multiple attempts.
This is Miss Hegseth.
The former, this is the second wife, made multiple attempts to contact the Bureau for a more substantive discussion. In other words, they just said, are you Samantha Hegseth? Were you married to him? Just got all the details. Mm-hmm. This is like what you would do if, almost like you're taking the first round of interviews. But her calls were not returned last week.
We already checked our boxes, Miss Hegseth.
Yeah. Actually,
we were in charge of finding out if you were actually the second or the third wife. We established you were the second.
Right.
And so we're done, dude.
Yeah. And this is reminiscent of the fact that it came out that the FBI did not do its due diligence in looking into the Kavanaugh accusations.
Oh, well, you don't need to have the FBI, right, Matt? Oh, you got to be shitting me.
Well, Kavanaugh in 2018, when he was undergoing a similar process, there were apparently over 4,000 tips that were sent into the FBI, and it came out years later that it was the Trump administration that was vetting which ones should be followed up on and which ones should not. Because, okay, that's a ton of tips, and a lot of them I probably assume are not leads that you can follow up on. But some of them maybe, and apparently the supposedly independent process, the final say was, of course, the Trump administration on Kavanaugh. So it seems like there's maybe something similar going on here. Let's listen to a little bit more from Kane. Chris Wray, great. I'll always keep those Republican appointees to the FBI. Totally.
Not a perfect person, not claiming to be.
But no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath, like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense and all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release?
Pause it for a second. He said that, not that I'm aware of, in multiple occasions. Now, I don't know. I got to check with an attorney on this, but I suspect that is a legal, he is advised to say that legally because if he has signed one, he has an obligation to the other party as well. And so he could say that, I think, if he could argue that he is bound by that non-disclosure agreement. Now, maybe behind closed doors, in a closed door session, he would have to say that he has. But I'm not sure about that. I think
it's simpler in that he says he's been coached to say not that I'm aware of when there's a question he doesn't want to go on under oath saying affirmatively.
Well, if he signed it, he would have to be aware of it. Now, maybe it is a something that his attorneys had his ex-wife sign, and they're just like, this is something we do, whether you know about it or not. You know, you don't read all that.
Maybe he signs so many NDAs that he forgets which situations he signs them in.
But these hearings, like we've seen, like Kavanaugh lied.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You just have to be able to get out with plausible deniability so you don't perjure yourself.
Or the other answer is, the reason why I drink 3 gin and tonics in the morning is because I know in the afternoon I'm going to have to sign some stuff, and I don't want to know what it is.
He forgot that he signed it.
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
phrase,
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us.
Pause it. I love that response. You lied to your wife over and over and over again. Senator, my wife is great, and she has been very honest with me. That's basically what he's saying there. Is there one more exchange that's worth going? I mean, there's a lot more to this, but it's like this. And I think
maybe
let's just go for another 30 more seconds.
Yeah.
Ask the moms.
There you go.
There we go, Bradley.
Appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us.
Kane did a good job here, folks.
I mean, between this and, he stood up about the continued funding of Israel. So Tim Kaine, I think we can safe to say, as of now, he's above replacement level Democrat in the Senate right now.
All right. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington's 7th Congressional District. She is the chair emerita of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and the ranking member of the House Judiciary Immigration Subcommittee. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. It's the beginning of the year. People make resolutions. Time of year where people think about different health goals. Exercising more, eating better, maybe losing weight, doing stuff to just keep you healthy in general. But a goal without a plan is a plan to fail. Prolon's 5-day program gives you tools to put your resolutions into action with science-backed plan that makes it easy to stay focused and achieve real results. Prolon's fasting mimicking diet is a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe they're fasting. And there's all sorts of benefits to cells thinking that they're fasting. I don't think. It was researched and developed for decades at USC's Longevity Institute, backed by U.S. medical centers. Prolon helps promote healthy blood sugar, enhanced skin appearance, fat loss, and improved energy and focus. It all starts with their 5-day program, snacks, soups, and beverages designed to keep your body in a fasting state. There is no guesswork. There's no planning required, which is, believe me, a super relief after the holidays or just in general for me, whenever. But what it is, 3 consecutive cycles of Prolon have been shown to reduce your biological age score by an average of 2.5 years and your waist circumference by 1.5 inches. I did this last year. Right around this time, I'm overdue. Basically because of the longevity stuff. Apparently what happens, and I can't remember exactly now because I had read into it quite a bit last year, but in the first couple of days, your body just reacts to you not having food. Then it goes into like that ketosis state. And then it goes into another state where essentially you get like cell regeneration. Mm-hmm. This is according to the research from the USC's Longevity Institute. And you'd think this thing is impossible to do. I certainly was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. But I actually felt much better than I thought. I mean, there were moments where it was really difficult. But it's not full-on fasting. It's mimicking fasting. You don't get a ton of calories, but they spread out in such a way, and you still have energy throughout the whole time. Just in time for the new year, Prolon offering the Majority Report with Sam Seder listeners 15% off their 5-day nutrition program for your post-holiday glow-up when you go to prolonlife.com/majority. That's PROLON life.com/majority for 15% off. prolonlife.com/majority. Also, sponsoring the program today, Blue Land. I am so into this stuff, I can't tell you.
We use it all around the office?
We use it in the office. I use it now. They got toilet bowl cleaners. You just drop a tablet in. It all foams up. It comes in a tin that you can leave in the bathroom, so you don't have to have a bottle of toilet bowl cleaner in there. All of my spray cleaning stuff. I got a utility split or all around, whatever it is, everything cleaner, a window and a bathroom cleaner. They send you tablets. Well, let me just read their thing. But Blue Land's on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic. People know I've been trying to do this for a long time. They have essentially reinvented cleaning essentials. Better for you, better for the planet in a myriad ways. They offer refillable cleaning products with like a cohesive design throughout. Looks great on your counter or in your bathroom or wherever it is, but also like everything is color coded. It is really like idiot proof for someone like myself. Refills start at just $2.25. You can set up a subscription or buy in bulk for even more savings. What you do is you fill your reusable spray bottles with water. They're color coded. Then you take a color-coded tablet and drop in a tablet. They dissolve. Maybe give it a little bit of a shake, not much, and then you're done. You have your cleaning supplies. Blue Land products are independently tested to perform alongside major brands, are free from dyes, bleach, harsh chemicals. They have cleaning sprays, they have hand soap, they have toilet bowl cleaner, they have laundry tablets. All Blue Land products are made with clean ingredients you can feel good about. Dishwasher tablets, not wrapped in plastic, so you don't get any microplastics on your plates or in your body or in the water supply. It's really great stuff. It's trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. Blue Land has a special offer for listeners right now. Get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/majority. Don't want to miss this. Blueland.com/majority for 15% off. That's blueland.com/majority. Get 15% off. Do what I did. Buying a bunch of stuff that first time and get you get you 15% off all of that. And the beauty of it is like you can literally get months and months of supplies of any of this stuff. They come in like compostable bags and they're not that big. And you can stock up even if you have an apartment.
Right.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington's 7th Congressional District. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Pleasure to welcome to the program Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington's 7th Congressional District. She's the ranking member of the House Judiciary Immigration Subcommittee and Chair Emerita of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Congresswoman, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
Now, does does that mean that you go back and interfere with leadership races for the younger members, or do you stay out of that?
You know, it just means I'm there to continue to provide support to our new CPC chair, and it's a very distinguished sounding title, isn't it? I will stay as co-chair of the CPC PAC. And so that will continue to be a big priority for us, is to build that and make sure we're building the ranks of progressive members.
All right, great. Well, I think we have some questions about like sort of the future of the Progressive Caucus and how it works within the context of the greater Democratic Caucus. But let's start with immigration. The Laken Riley Act passed the House, as you know. And it appears to be on track, at least, in the Senate. All but 9 Democrats voted to allow, essentially not to filibuster the bill, allow it to go forward. I know there are amendments out there. Just broadly speaking, before we get into some of the specifics about it, what's your perspective on this? This is, doesn't seem to have been a dramatic change in the Democrats in the House approach towards this, but certainly the Democratic Party seems to have really caved in many respects on this entire question.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I really hope that the Senate does not pass this. There is a cloture vote that would be required to end debate. And so that is another opportunity for people to weigh in. I think that what the Republicans do over and over again, and it's the same playbook here, is they attach the name of the victim of a terrible, terrible crime. Laken Riley was murdered, and the person that did it has been convicted and should be prosecuted to the full extent. The law does absolutely nothing to change what currently happens. If you are a undocumented immigrant, you're convicted of murder, you are immediately mandatorily detained and subject to deportation. So it does nothing to do that, but to change that. But what it does do is it essentially tries to criminalize undocumented immigrants who have not been convicted of any crime, but have merely been accused of a shoplifting, or in this case, a shoplifting or a theft. That means that if you are wrongly accused, you still don't get any due process and you are mandatorily detained. This just happened in Georgia, where somebody was accused of a bank robbery, and they found out 10 days later that person was wrongly accused. In this Laken Riley bill, that person would have absolutely no due process. They would be mandatorily detained. And that is, in my mind, this is the highway to mass deportation. And that is really what the administration is trying to do, is criminalize immigrants without any due process. And then once they're in the criminal justice system, then they can say, well, we're deporting these criminals, when in fact they've never even been convicted, much less had any due process. So it is a bad bill. It is the formula that they are going to use over and over again. And I think Democrats have to be clear that, of course, we all believe that if you've committed a heinous crime like that, you should be mandatorily detained. You should be subjected to deportation if you've been convicted of that crime. That is already the law. What we can't do is criminalize huge numbers of people simply because they're accused. Because I'll give you another example. An undocumented farm worker walks into a shop, and the shopkeeper doesn't like the way that person looks,
right? Well,
and accuses him of
that was the nature of the question I was going to ask you. What constitutes an accusation, right? I mean, like, is there a formalization of what constitutes even an accusation in that instance? Because I think that, there's a presumption out there. Well, the police have arrested this person, they've caught them red-handed, and the police, but it literally can be. You have your neighbor doesn't like you. They stole my dog. And,
exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly right, Sam. And, that can apply for anything, right? And if you're mandatorily detained, you don't have access to attorneys. You don't necessarily have access to people who are going to help prove that that you are, that you're innocent of what you were accused of. So yes, this affects anybody. And that's why I call it a highway to mass deportation.
Speak to us also about the other part of the bill that allows states, presumably the state AGs, to undermine, question all of the immigration or a significant amount of the immigration process by the federal government, because it feels like this is a two-step, right? First step is give ICE sort of blanket authority to just randomly pick up immigrants and begin the deportation process, sort of almost like extrajudicially.
Yeah.
And then the other step of this is for, in the event that you can't actually physically deport quickly, start having camps, presumably in states that are happy to have these camps. I'm thinking of you, Texas. But having the state AGs sort of, don't we have a serious constitutional problem here?
Yes. And I said that on the floor, that I think that part of the bill is literally unconstitutional and came down in a Supreme Court decision relatively recently, 8-1 majority, that you cannot, local and state governments cannot preempt federal immigration law. They can't be the ones enforcing immigration law. This gives the Ken Paxtons and every other state AG that wants to be a part of the Trump cult and demonize immigrants the ability to override the decisions that ICE makes, that the federal government makes, that we have constitutionally obligated in our federal laws. And that is, unconstitutional. So you're absolutely right. There are two parts to this bill. The first is the mass deportation, mass highway to mass deportation, and the second is unconstitutional.
In a larger sense, give me there seems to have been a vacuum coming from the Democrats, frankly, on this entire issue. And I'm thinking in terms of President Biden and whatnot, but we're seeing what appears to be a significant erosion of support for immigrants in the Senate. Give me your perspective on this, because it's as if somewhere around, immigration was used as a a sweetener to, I guess the IRA or whatever it was that that Biden was looking for at the end of 2023, and it all of a sudden took on a life of its own. And the Democrats seem to have completely left the playing field on this issue.
Well, look, I've been critical of my own party for a couple of decades now on immigration because we have run away from explaining to the American people how broken our current immigration system is and how we know how it should be fixed. It hasn't been modernized or updated in 30 years, Sam. And so it gives a real opportunity to Republicans on the other side to say, everything is bad. Immigrants are a problem. They're a threat to national security. They bring in communicable diseases, all the old tropes that we've heard throughout time. And if you don't fight back against that and explain exactly what is the problem and what is our solution and who is blocking that, Republicans have blocked modernizations to the immigration law over and over and over again so that they can leave it out there as a campaign issue, then Americans are going to start getting tired of this. And I think that's what's happened. And yet, despite all of the demonization of immigrants, if you look at the polling, it's definitely gotten worse of the American people. But if you look at the polling and you look at it deeply and you look at questions that are legitimately asked, what you find is actually most Americans do still have a connection to immigration, do believe that it should happen in the United States, that we do need immigration, but it should be a fair and orderly process. I agree with them. I agree that we need a fair system so that people who have gotten into the system and then wait decades to be with their family members, that should not happen. If we have talented people that are bringing real talents to the United States that America needs, they should have a legal pathway to come in. If we want to continue to be the country that protects human rights, around the world, we are signatories to an asylum convention and domestic law that requires us to keep the option open for people to come and apply for asylum. But if we don't actually update the system, then people are just going to go to the borders, which is what is happening now. And so if you really want border security, which Republicans claim to want, then you have to modernize the existing system. Update the legal pathways, put the resources in so that people don't have to wait years to get an immigration judge to listen to their case. And there are some changes we need to make in all of these programs. Let's do that. And let's actually make it a functioning system.
All right. Lastly, I just saw Michael Bennet, the senator from Colorado, just offered an amendment that essentially, as far as I read it, would, for all intents and purposes, add the Dreamer Act to this bill, allowing for DACA recipients to have permanent status in the country. And then also what appears to be some form of guest worker provision. Where would you be on that bill if it included those two elements?
Well, I just don't think that's going to happen. When we had the border security bill last year that was negotiated by President Biden, some Democrats and Republicans, apparently there were real efforts to attach the Dreamer provision, the DREAM Act, which is bipartisan. The Farm Worker Act is bipartisan. Neither of those have come up for a vote in the Senate. And Republicans refused and Democrats caved. And so I think we just have to be clear that at the end of the day, what Republicans want to do is nothing positive on real solutions and continue to just push forward things that terrify Americans or try to terrify Americans and try to divide the Democratic Party. And I think we have to stand strong and united as Democrats for our values and to explain to people what exactly they're doing.
I mean, what is there a contingency plan for this type of situation? I mean, I understand what your perspective is on this, but there are rumors that, and I don't necessarily buy it, frankly, and we're going to get into this later about what's going on with Gaza. But in this instance, well, I mean, what is the contingency plan for the Democrats in the event that, okay, somehow Trump says, you know what, I'll do the Dreamers, I'll throw that in too, because we're gonna we're going to round up everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's the trade-off I'm going to make. I think it's unlikely, but I mean, what's the contingency there?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on a bill right now that would do the things that we've had bipartisan support for, many of the things that we've had bipartisan support for. We'll be ready for that instance if it comes up. I just haven't seen it, but we're looking for those moments. I think that if Elon Musk suddenly says, yeah, actually, this country does need immigrants, not just high-skilled workers, but immigrants of all kinds, who do you think is going to rebuild California after these fires, after these climate disasters across the country? It's immigrants that come in and rebuild. It's immigrants that are keeping the dairy industry afloat. It's immigrants who are in our hospitals, serving as doctors and nurses. And this is immigrants of all statuses, undocumented immigrants, TPS, DACA, all of them are actually performing important functions if we let them. A lot of the ones that aren't working right now is because they're not allowed to work. But this is, I think, we have a contingency plan in that we have a solution that could very easily be bipartisan. Remember, Sam, that in 2013, there was a comprehensive immigration reform bill that passed the Senate with 68 bipartisan votes. It had tons of border security in it. Actually, we've already done more on the border security than was in that bill, and that was 11 years ago. And yet, even with passing with that many votes, it came to the House. John Boehner was the Speaker of the House and did not bring it to the floor for a vote. Why? Because he knew it would pass, and they want to leave this out there. So I'm always open. If there are people who suddenly want to deal and trade and the deal is a good deal, that's sure, we'll look at that. We're willing to look at that, and we're still continuing to do that work. But a lot of the people, unfortunately, the Republicans on the other side that were willing to stand up on immigration are now gone. So let's see where this goes. But listen, we're always willing to talk about it and to see if there's really a deal that can be struck. But otherwise, we're going to have to take back the majorities. We're going to have to stay united now, take back the majorities, and then we're going to have to implement a series of changes so we can actually pass this with Democratic votes, because I'm just not convinced that Republicans are going to come around.
Right. I'm concerned a little bit about these notions. I've heard you and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talk about the economic populism. I know that was a part of her pitch in terms of that leadership fight. But on the right, their vision is basically populism reinforcing existing hierarchies, and for powerful people, it's a racialized vision. And the contrast with the Democrats, I just don't think has been there. And within the context of immigration, we just left a complete vacuum for them to dominate the discourse there. But when I hear you or AOC say economic populism being the future for the Democrats, versus, I don't know, Chris Murphy or other members of the party, what does that actually look like? Because it can't just be throwing immigrants under the bus and stopping using pronouns at different, campaign events. It's got to be centered around a concrete vision of, a Green New Deal, immigration reform and a positive vision, Medicare for all, student debt forgiveness, that kind of thing. Like, is there a concrete discussion being had right now within the party about what that economic populist vision, which is very buzzy right now, like what that really looks like going forward?
Yes, I think there is that discussion, but it needs a lot more conversation. I'll use my state as an example. Washington State was the only state that did not move to the right in this last election. And I'll tell you why. We were the first ones to tie minimum wage to inflation, right? Going back several decades. So our wages stayed higher. Now, on top of that, Seattle was the first major city in the country to pass a $15 minimum wage. The state went forward then and raised the minimum wage. So the minimum wage in Washington State is high compared to other states. And yet we have still done well. We are still a good place for business. All of the, naysaying about raising the minimum wage didn't come to pass. But on top of that, we provided paid leave for people through a ballot initiative. We actually extended gun safety legislation. We instituted a change so that seniors can get at-home care, long-term care. We just passed not universal child care, but We have a much more expansive definition of childcare with a vision of universal childcare. And so what's happening is average working people and poor people, while they're still struggling, I'm not saying they're not struggling, they are, while they're still struggling, they have much more sense that Democrats have stood up for them and delivered for them. And so when it came to trying to divide people in Washington state on these divisive issues like immigration or trans kids, people said, nah, you know what? Actually, I think they're working for me. We've taken on corporations. Our former AG, who's now our governor, has taken on corporate concentration and monopoly power. And so I think all of these things are part of what the vision looks like, of what it means to fight. And I do think that corporate concentration, corporate power, the elites owning the party is, those are the things that we are going to have to be very vocal about fighting back against, and really having a strategy for every member and every candidate who's running as a Democrat to be very clear about where they stand and who they stand with and what the vision is that we're going to deliver.
You mentioned, and it's a little tangential, but you said that Washington State was one of the states that, or maybe the only state that didn't move to the right. I mean, is that the way that you perceive what happened in this past election, that there was a move to the right? Or was there a
Well, I should have probably said Trump to be accurate, because I do think that, and as a previous chair of the Progressive Caucus, we worked a lot with the Freedom Caucus on a number of things, including antitrust, including FISA reform and privacy concerns. There were a number of places where we actually, had strong collaborations. But also, if you look at states that voted for Donald Trump, they also voted, this is to Emma's point about economic populism, they also voted for raising the minimum wage. They voted for paid leave. And so when I think about left and right, it's probably not the best description, and I'll think about it, but they've voted for people they voted for Trump. But I don't believe that the reasons that they voted for Trump are actually going to come into play. And I think people were less likely to be taken by the anti-immigrant, anti-trans stuff if economically they felt like Democrats were taking care of them. And so we continue to be in Washington state, one of the best states for immigrant rights. We have been really on the forefront of protecting immigrants, protecting trans LGBTQ communities across the board. So nothing's being sacrificed there, but we're not allowing people to divide us on those issues because we're also answering economic needs.
Well, I guess what I was asking, I mean, and fair enough in terms of how we sort of perceive what people actually voted for. But as far as I can tell from the data, this was an election less of people who did. I guess statistically speaking, the people who voted for Trump in 2016, or I should say 2020, he got the same share of the vote as he did in 2020. What happened was, at least from what it looks like on the data, and as many people went from Biden to Trump as Trump to Harris, but there was a significant percentage of people who voted, who should have been voting in this election, that didn't.
Correct.
On the Democratic side, as opposed to on the Republican side. I mean, is that the broader understanding? I mean, what is the understanding of what happened amongst your Democratic colleagues as to what happened here?
I think there are several threads. And so what you said is something I've been saying for a long time, that we should think about who the real swing voter is. When somebody says swing voter, some pundit on television or some, big consultant, they usually mean the independent or conservative Democrat or independent voter, usually white, usually in suburban or rural parts of the country. Those voters are important. I'm not saying ignore them, but what I think we should do is think about the biggest base of swing voters as being our base that would naturally be a Democratic base if we put effort into and respect towards actually earning their votes. And that is young people. That's a lot of folks of color who feel like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have left them behind, forgotten them, that the whole system is rigged against them, and that they just want now, at this point, they're so frustrated that they're either going to stay home or they're going to vote for a candidate that they think is at least willing to upend the current system as it is. And so that's, in my view, that's a big part of why we lost a lot of votes, because we had a 7-state strategy that did not target every state across the country, only 7 states. We did not try to cater to and listen to and respect our biggest base of swing voters that would naturally be a Democratic base. And I think over decades, we have alienated the working class, going back to NAFTA, going back to a whole set of economic policies that we either embraced or didn't embrace. Thinking minimum wage here, raising the minimum wage when we had the trifecta, things like that made people question our loyalties, along with taking money from big corporations and big wealthy donors. So I think all of those things are part of what happened, and it's going to take a little bit of time to separate them out and to see what we are willing to do and stand up for as a Democratic Party.
And you mentioned there young people and voters of color. Now, when I first started getting excited about politics was the Obama campaign in 2008. And really, it was his stance on the Iraq War. I did not like that Hillary Clinton had voted for the Iraq War and that Obama was in opposition to it. And when I look at this election, I really wonder if that group of people, young people and voters of color who have experienced maybe American imperialism or like the boot of the state, seeing every day on their feeds, like a child whose brain is falling out of their skull as his father holds him up in Gaza. And Amnesty International now is calling it a genocide. Just that idea of like the economy's not working for me, and this is where our tax dollars are going. Yeah. Is the party reckoning with how this support for this slaughter has potentially damaged the party's brand long term for an entire generation of young people and also the voters you describe?
My honest answer to you is I don't think that conversation is happening. I really don't. I think it's been frustrating to me as somebody who shares, and has been really vocal on Gaza, and been targeted for it by some of the big moneyed interests on this issue, many of whom are Republican mega donors, by the way. I think that I agree with you that this was not, by the way, this was not just young people. It was not just folks who are Arab or Muslim, or Middle Eastern even. It was Black folks. I mean, I think that we saw I was in a lot of communities with Black people talking to leaders of the Black community who were really pushing on this as well. And I do think that there was a real disillusionment with our foreign policy and, specifically on the war in the Middle East. I mean, I think that maybe there was some drop off early on with some other things, but I think that this issue alone, certainly if you look at key states like Michigan and even Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, there were significant drop-offs and I know because I went door to door on this issue specifically, trying to see if there was a way to bring voters in while recognizing the despair that I felt as well. And so I don't feel like this is one area where I do not yet feel like we are having a real conversation about the consequences, the moral consequences, the consequences to U.S. leadership in the world, much less the political ramifications of what the United States has done or not done.
Since we're talking about foreign policy, and I know you just only have a couple more minutes left, and I do want to get to sort of like the Progressive Caucus, but what's your quick reaction to Biden naming this naval ship after George Bush? I entered in this space as a function, as a fully formed adult, being older, maybe the oldest person on this call, because of the Iraq War. And, I spent a lot of time talking to the late John Conyers about George Bush and the impeachment and the reformation of George Bush. It just seems to me to be shocking that we see this. And, 4 years ago, there was a movement to tear down Confederate statues because they provided a misinterpretation of history, or a specific interpretation of history that, of the lost cause. And we took those down because it is because of the values that it is propagating. What's your reaction to Biden?
Yeah, I also came into kind of my activism with the Iraq War. I mean, I led what was the largest demonstration in Seattle history around the Iraq War. I wasn't a member of Congress at the time. And then I sued George Bush for the deportation of Muslims, Somali Americans, and won. It was a class action lawsuit. We protected over 4,000 Somalis across the country, prevented the Bush administration from deporting them. So I share your concerns. And I think that what is happening is that this is what Trump does. He throws out something so extreme. He is so extreme that all of a sudden, people that came before him, Dick Cheney, George Bush, they all suddenly seem to be reasonable. And I think we have to be very careful about this. And I think we have to be clear that while those people may not be as extreme as Trump, this is not a scale we should be using on any level to assess both the damage that's been done historically, to cover up the damage that's been done historically, or as sort of our guide for what we want in the future.
All right. Lastly, the Progressive Caucus. I know obviously you don't have the same position, but where do you think the Progressive Caucus should go as a caucus to exert more influence? One of the things that has been bandied about is like actually having a litmus test as to who gets that imprimatur. It would obviously shrink the caucus, but it might make it more potent, however you, what's your sense of that?
Well, when I came in, as I've been chair for 4 years, sole chair, and then I was co-chair with Mark Bocam for 2 years before that. And I put in place term limits because I actually believe that leadership should change of these caucuses. So I took myself out of the running. Yeah, which is an unusual thing for politicians. From
your mouth to some other people's ears, but go ahead.
I think we should do it as a party. I mean, I really do. But that was the thing I noticed, is that there really wasn't a cohesive utilization of the leveraging of power, the leveraging of votes. And so we passed several years ago a rules reforms package that required members to, in order to be a Progressive Caucus member, you had to be a co-sponsor on 70% of what we call our flagship bills. That's like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, et cetera. With some, again, in all of these things, we have people who are in really tough frontline districts, and that doesn't always work. So we give them a little bit of an out. But essentially, we're like, you got to be with us on the majority of issues. And then we also put in place other requirements for people to attend meetings, because that's where we actually push back on the lobbyists that are at our door. And there used to be like 10 people at a meeting. So you could have experts come in and explain a bill that was before us on privatization of Medicare, for example, through Medicare Advantage. But if no one's there, then they all go sign the industry letter after that. So really big things. But the biggest was probably this: if the Progressive Caucus takes a position on a bill, that we expect members to vote with us 2/3 of the time. And so that was the beginning. It's why on Build Back Better, we were able to hold not just 3 or 4 members, but 60 plus members who were ready to vote no on the infrastructure bill, which is why it never came to the floor, which is the only reason we got Build Back Better. Because please don't forget that the Senate sent us the infrastructure bill with every single Democrat, every single Senate Democrat voting for the infrastructure bill. And then we started getting all this pressure from people saying, don't pass the infrastructure bill. But that took away a whole ton of leverage already when the Senate just unanimously, all Democrats voted for that thing. And it was left to us. There was no legislation called Build Back Better. There wasn't even language on the table for it. And so we had to say, no, we're going to stick together. But I wanted it to be 2/3 of the caucus, not just 5 or 6 people, because we also needed to win the public narrative on why we were doing this and why childcare and housing were so important. And of course, we never would have gotten the Inflation Reduction Act had we not done that. That was lifted directly from Build Back Better. So I think that there's more to do in terms of leverage. And I think that this gave us a really good kind of beginning for how we do this. But a lot of this is about how you go member to member, how you build the desire, the ability, and the courage to stand up in these difficult moments when the speaker is calling you, when the president is calling you, when everybody and their brother are calling you to get your vote. And you have to explain why you're going to hold and fight for something better. I don't think that the American people expect us to win every fight, but I do think that they want to see us fighting for them and not for the wealthiest, and not giving in for the lowest common denominator too quickly. We should fight for the things that we want and put up a really good fight. And at the end of the day, we may not win every fight, but at least we've identified, and the country was with us, and 99% of the Democratic Party was with us, but 2 senators who, are no longer there blocked the whole thing.
Yep.
Well, Representative Pramila Jayapal, Washington 7th District, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Been interesting.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland, Majority Report. That is the free half of the program, folks. Again, we gave an extra 20 minutes away free today.
Yes, we did, because we're that generous.
Damn it. We are adjusting to the news environment, which, if you were with us during the first Trump administration, it's extremely dense. We've got a lot of news coming at us, and sometimes we are not good at clock management. And by we, I mean, of course, me.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
So, folks, you can help support this show. Send me to a clock management class by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free half free of commercials, but you can IM the fun half. And I just saw an IM earlier, somebody saying that they've hit a rough spot with some of their finances. Always in that situation, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Put into the subject line "fun half," and we will work out something with you. We are not going to lock anybody out for finances. So, but if you are one of those people who can afford to support the program and you listen to it with any type of regularity, and you want us to keep it on, jointhemajorityreport.com is where you can help us do that. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Great coffee. You can get the Majority Report blend. You can get a bunch of other blends, or you can get some single origin coffees as well there. But great stuff, great company. Justcoffee.coop. Emma, ESVN.
On ESPN, yesterday, Bradley and I broke down the wild card round of the playoffs. We talked also about the drama with the Cowboys and their head coach, what else is new, and a little bit about some of the gambling scandals in sports right now. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
Matt.
And Left Reckoning tonight, Francesca Fiorentini talking about the fires in Los Angeles. And we'll be talking about loneliness and other stuff like that. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Oh, did we plug
right.
Matt's
Francesca Fiorentini, friend of the show, and I don't know if I don't think we've had her husband Matt on. But I've been on his show, Bad at Hasbro, which is like an anti-Zionist podcast. It's really funny, and he's a great guy. And we love Francesca as well. He's really funny. They both are. And they're just a wonderful couple, and I'm sure his sister is great too. So his twin sister lost everything in the fires, has young children. There's a GoFundMe that you can donate to help them get back on their feet. Like, they were only able to take, I think, a small amount of, clothes to escape the fire. And so their kids' toys are all gone. Everything's gone from their house. This is Francesca's sister-in-law, Matt's sister, and her family. So if you want to support them, we'll put a link to that below in the YouTube descriptions.
Yeah, we will put that in the podcast and YouTube description. All right, folks. Matt, you finished yours, right? Yep. We will see you in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's...
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go start one.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Let's read some IMs. Serious business. If you're upset about Clinton and Bush getting an aircraft carrier named after them, wait until you see the nuclear sub named after Kissinger. Is that a real thing?
I think that might be.
I'm sure.
And if it is, I'm sure it is. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Was it done by a Democrat? I hope not.
Well, I mean, Hillary Clinton was running on how much Kissinger
I know.
mentored her, so.
My understanding, too, is that Rachel Maddow was also a little bit of a supporter. But hey, Warrior Supreme, the confirmations hearings for Hegseth have been wild today. If you're looking for things to talk about, it's been really good. We have played a couple of clips from that. We'll play more tomorrow as well. Dizzle McFizzle. I became a paying member to call Sam handsome because I feel he doesn't hear it enough in his life. Left his best. Well, actually, that's true. Mr. Feeney, forcing listeners to still consume your media even when you can't afford to. This must be the grifter mentality that Tim Pool is always calling you out for, Sam. Well, he's not the only one, to be fair to Tim Pool.
That you're grifting or prop flipping.
Mm-hmm. Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. Panther City Patriot. I firmly believe that becoming a member of this program provides the most valuetainment for your buck.
Hell yeah.
You hear that, Miami?
CPG. Did you guys see Hirono ask Hegseth to name the countries in ASEAN only to make for him to name South Korea, Japan, and Australia, which none of which are in ASEAN? Yes, I did see that. We did see that clip, actually. Ramona Frankenstein. I got my Emma Jordy hat yesterday and it looks so friggin' sick. I love it. I do embroidery professionally and I can personally confirm the stitching on the hats is immaculate. Also, I wore the rest of it the night I was watching the movie Election and realized about halfway through that I'm a massive dork for watching a movie about an election while wearing a merch from a lefty political talk show.
The movie Election, very good movie.
Apologies, it was Duckworth, not Hirono, who asked Hegseth. Yes.
Okay. Election's a very good movie about, like almost like psychosexual power and politics, and it's a great satire, and I love that movie.
All right, we will open the phones in a bit. First, let's start on this. This is also big news getting subsumed. Nobody will care because it's sort of baked into the cake about Donald Trump that he's criminal. He is a convicted felon, 34 felony counts in the New York City case against him for fraudulently reporting business expenses. As you know, there was also a special counsel that was investigating him for two different things. One was he stole some documents from the White House. And then when he was asked to bring them back, which happens all the time, sometimes you could take them by mistake. Various presidents have done this. He not only refused to give them back, but hid them from the FBI when they came searching for them, at least on multiple occasions.
Mm-hmm. Like when they came and seized the documents that he said, there were ones missing.
Yes.
So like that was part of the scandal around it. It was very, and then the Republicans tried to say it was the same thing with Biden accidentally having some classified documents at his home, which he voluntarily reported to the government.
Yes,
that was
Biden found them and Biden gave them back.
And this is bipartisan. Mike Pence, same thing happened after the scandal with Trump. It happens to all of them, but the point is just like Trump tried to hang on to them for his own ends.
And don't go in that bathroom.
In that report, that report was not released. There were two different reports. The report on the documents not released. We will see if that report gets released because apparently within that report are, if not speculation, evidence as to why he kept them, like what his intention was on keeping those. That would be interesting. Obviously, he cannot be prosecuted because of the Supreme Court rulings. And this is what was in the report on about January 6th. Remember, how many people have gone to jail now over January 6th? Is it 200 plus? Because of the violent acts that either they engaged in or encouraged and conspired to help people perpetrate on that day. Incidentally, I should just tell you, it's not legal in many instances to occupy a government building. We've seen many acts of civil disobedience when that happens. People sit there quietly, they sing songs. Maybe they, grab each other's arms, and then the cops come over and go, I'm going to arrest you. And more often than not, they stand up and they turn around and they're taken out because it's a civil disobedience protest. When you storm the Capitol building, smash windows, beat up cops, if there was anybody else, if they had private security guards there, or if they had anybody else, they would have beat up those people too. There was every reason to believe that they were going to physically assault the lawmakers. I mean, what were they going to do when they got in there? They could have sat in the hallways of the Capitol and said, "We're not leaving," just to protest. They didn't do that.
They were chanting "Hang Mike Pence." Maybe that was just for fun.
We saw Josh Hawley run like a
little bitch,
track star.
Yeah,
a little bitch.
That guy did the 50 very quickly.
The only video I've posted on my TikTok.
They were trying to interfere with the certification process. You didn't hear much about the certification process this time because there was nobody who was geared up. Nobody had been encouraged for months that the election had been stolen, and nobody was going in there and trying to sway it. Nobody was coordinating with, Ron Johnson to have fake electors, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, here is CNN reporting on what was in this special counsel's final report.
Breaking overnight, if he was not going to be president in 6 days, he would have been a convicted federal felon. That is the thrust of the final report from now former special counsel Jack Smith, released by the Justice Department while you were sleeping. It is an extraordinary document for posterity, if nothing else. And there will be nothing else. Jack Smith resigned Friday night, and there will be no prosecution. And this pertains only to the election interference case. The report on classified documents will not be made public. Breaking overnight.
Okay, so just to fill in some of that stuff. There's a quote from the report. The department's view that the Constitution prohibits the continued indictment and prosecution of a president is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof or merits of the prosecution, which the office stands fully behind. Indeed, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. It's just a part of the 137-page report. Smith, this according to the New York Times, took Mr. Trump to task not only for his efforts to reverse the results of a free and fair election, but also for consistently encouraging, quote, violence against his perceived opponents throughout the chaotic weeks between Election Day and January 6th. Smith laid the attack on the Capitol squarely at Trump's feet, quoting from the evidence in several criminal cases of people charged with taking part in the riot who made clear that they believed they were acting on Mr. Trump's behalf. Well, I can't help it if my followers are idiots. At one point, Smith covered the trauma experienced by Capitol police officers who were attacked during the riot, including shell shock and the inability to move. He quoted one officer who described the effort to keep rioters from getting to congressional staff members inside the Capitol. The officer said that for them, that could have meant, quote, possible death. People are getting killed and maimed.
And what was also, if you recall, we got these details, maybe it was from the January 6th committee, or it was in one of the investigations about I think that's what it was, the timeline of Donald Trump sending out that tweet about Mike Pence, essentially targeting him. And there was an additional detail in Jack Smith's report, because the January 6th committee had basically that he was just watching television and seeing what was happening, and then sent out that tweet that was targeting ire, at the very least, at Mike Pence. But this Jack Smith has the detail that he was watching TV, and on the TV, it was a rioter saying that Pence was Trump's last hope, and that's when he went and sent off that tweet. So it was both reacting to the TV and specifically trying to target Pence in that way.
The interesting thing in this, too, is that Smith wrote briefly in the report that his team, quote, had made a preliminary determination that the admissible evidence could justify seeking charges against certain co-conspirators. They started to evaluate whether any such new case should be joined with Mr. Trump's or brought separately, but because the office reached no final conclusions, I'm quoting, and did not seek indictments against anyone other than Mr. Trump, the head of the criminal conspiracies and their intended beneficiary, this report does not elaborate further on the investigation and preliminary assessment of uncharged individuals. This report should not be read to allege that any particular person other than Mr. Trump committed a crime, nor should it be read to exonerate any particular person. So there was a lot of people invested in Donald Trump winning, and I suspect some of them may have been looking at investigations of their own and would have been able to join Trump in jail.
But
my understanding is what happens when they all go to jail. They all make like pasta one night. It's like puttanescas, everybody gets around and makes the gravy.
Yes, I mean that the Goodfellas energy is strong here, but a lot less fun. Like the oh shoot, I had a point about. Oh, this Jack Smith actively chose not to charge additional people here because he wanted to expedite this and have it basically done prior to the election. He was not able to make that happen, but or at the very least, like not have it bogged down in the way we're seeing the RICO case has been down in Georgia because there's so many people involved there.
So that's that report. It'll live for posterity, and I don't know. Hopefully, in 4 years, folks will be able to remember it at very least. Who knows?
Yeah.
Let's turn to what's going on in California. Obviously, fires continue, and there continues obviously to be like sort of like recriminations and what could have been done to mitigate this. And there is a world in which you could have raised the budget of the LA Fire Department from, close to $900 million to, I don't know, $1.5 billion, I guess, and paid hundreds of millions of dollars for individuals to go and literally dig up every shrub on the mountainsides. You can't do controlled burns because of how dry everything was out there. Usually by this time of year, again, it has rained more. But there was a fire chief I saw, and I don't know if they were from LA County, who basically said what I think should be obvious to people. He said, when you have those fires and you are getting 100-mile-per-hour gusts, there's just nothing you can do. When fires are jumping 5-lane highways, there's nothing you're going to do to stop that fire. And that's what we were looking out there. I don't care anything about Karen Bass. I don't care anything about Gavin Newsom. They can both go away or not go away. I don't care. But most of these arguments that we're talking about are ways to deflect from the reality that climate change is real. And what we've seen in LA is going to be indicative of what we see in other places. It may not be in the form of fire. It may be in the form of floods. It may be in the form of hurricanes that are more powerful. It may be in the form of extreme heat. It may be in the form of, droughts. We don't know. But we're going to see this in places where humans have been able to live for an extended period of time. In North Carolina, they did not anticipate those type of floods in the areas that they had them. And now they've had them.
Was it DEI in that instance too? Like you're saying this connective tissue is the climate crisis, and I would agree, sort of, but perhaps it's DEI in all of these different states, and we're not figuring it out yet, right? That's what the Republicans seem to be zeroing in on.
Well, the premise is that if they were all white men, they would have used their magic, and despite the fact that Pat Riley is white, they would have used their magic, and I'm not Pat Riley, I'm sorry, Gavin Newsom. They would have used their magic, and they sort of look alike. And
yeah.
They would the same Armani cloth.
Exactly.
They're both a little like sleazy looking.
Yeah. And they would have used their magic and they would have prevented the fires. In the meantime, we're watching the Republicans, and, they have a problem because Tom Tillis, he's always on the edge of, potentially losing his seat.
Right.
And he's nervous in North Carolina because they just had those floods. Folks from
Roy
Florida.
Cooper is running against him, and Cooper has a lot of popularity and name recognition.
Yep.
And it's 2026, which will be an off year for they're off year elections and
party out of power.
Party. Yeah.
But in Florida, they're going to need more. They're going to need more aid in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I would even argue in Texas, maybe they're getting a little bit nervous. I mean, there are places around the country where people sort of like climate change is not real, but you never know how these things go. But you still have Republicans out there who are saying we need to condition aid. And here's what they're trying to do. They know they don't want to pass the debt ceiling. They want the debt ceiling to be raised because they want to allow Trump to cut taxes on billionaires and millionaires. But they don't want their fingerprints on the raising of that debt because they've told their minions that they're not going to raise the debt, that that's some type of special secret sauce. So they want to convince the Democrats to be the ones who raise the debt ceiling. But the Democrats are like, we're not going to help you out with this. You own it. And so the plan is, well, let's condition the aid to California and combine it with that vote so that if they want California to get aid, that's the way it'll work. Mike Johnson, his most Christian perspective on this is, yes, we should condition the aid to these people, thousands of people who've lost their homes, their schools, their businesses, whatever it is.
Are you open to providing aid to California without any conditions at all?
I think we've got to have a serious conversation about that. Obviously, there's been water resource mismanagement, forest management mistakes, all sorts of problems. And it does come down to leadership, and it appears to us that state and local leaders were derelict in their duty in many respects. So that's something that has to be factored in. I think there should probably be conditions on that aid. That's my personal view. We'll see what the consensus is. I haven't had a chance to socialize that with any of the members over the weekend because we've all been very busy, but it'll be part of the discussion for sure.
What about the deadline?
All right, so this is the game that they're playing, right? We're going to pretend like this could have never happened if there were better quality. Look, we saw this when Michigan Governor Snyder took over emergency powers in places like Flint, and then ended up poisoning thousands of children because it's all about local rule and states' rights until it's not. And let's just play this from Tommy Tuberville, too.
Yeah. I just want to mention that, Mike Johnson's from Louisiana and has a real connection to the oil and gas industry. So that's just something to note there.
Oh, wait, Louisiana. What
happened there?
What is that thing? Katrina. I wonder if they got any aid for Katrina.
I saw members of my extended family talk about how Biden didn't want to help Trumpers in Appalachia with floods 4 months ago, however long ago that was, that are basically applauding this sort of thing.
Go ahead.
Why should other states be bailing out California for choosing the wrong people to run their state?
We shouldn't be. They got 40 million people in that state, and they voting these imbeciles in office, and they continue to do it. And it's just a very small part of them in that state that's doing it. If you go to California, you run into a lot of Republicans, a lot of good people, and I hate it for them. But they are just overwhelmed by these inner city woke policies with the people that vote for them. And I don't mind sending them some money, but unless they show that they're going to change their ways and get back to building dams and storing water, doing the maintenance with the brush and the trees and everything that everybody else does in the country, and they refuse to do it, they don't deserve anything, to be honest with you, unless they show us they're going to make some changes, Chris.
All right, you know what? This is
inner cities. How subtle.
Yeah, this is an interesting theory. Maybe we should rank how states are doing as to whether they are deserving of federal funds.
Right?
Like, for instance, Alabama gets $2.17 for every $1 paid in federal taxes. So they get a bonus of an extra $1.17 for every dollar they pay in federal taxes. But Alabama's healthcare ranks as second worst in the nation. How much Medicaid and Medicare beneficiaries are getting down there? How much money they get
these
from
people in this
federal
leadership,
grants?
this anti-woke, anti-DEI leadership.
I mean, there could be too many white people running things down there, and maybe we have to scale back on some of this. Well,
you know how they do it in the outer city?
Let's take a look at what is that? Alabama's education ranking, number 45. How many states do we have in this country?
50, Sam.
Holy cow! They're in the 90th worst percentile or something. Damn.
Wow.
$64 billion in 2023 in direct payments, contracts, grants, financial assistance. Damn, that's a lot of money we're sending to these anti-wokers. Wow. I think we should hold back on that. Should we take some ratings? Do we know how many hurricanes Florida has? Because Florida keeps seeming to have these hurricanes. We're sending billions of dollars down there for these hurricane reliefs. Maybe they should, these anti-wokers there should figure out where they're building their houses.
I know.
Are we to believe there's no place that's safe from hurricanes in Florida? What about Texas? What about that emergency power and water situation they had in Texas? Did the federal government, can somebody help me out here? Did the federal government take over energy and water services in Texas? Did we demand removal of the people who screwed that up? People died. People died because of the power grid failures there, water failures there. We need to take a look at this stuff. In fact, we need to take a look at this whole thing about what's the ROI on our tax dollars from New York going to the federal government.
Especially since like Tuberville as an Alabama coach, right?
Auburn.
Auburn. Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, but that's a rivalry. But also, it's just like we wouldn't. The point is that Democrats don't engage in politics in that way.
Nope.
And that's the contrast that should be. Alabama deserves more investment. Alabama deserves a better education system and better health care. And that's not achieved by punishing Alabama with austerity. It's not achieved by punishing North Carolina they had a Democratic governor, but any other red state that experiences a natural disaster. But that's the game that the Republicans play. So this is what we're going to get for the next 4 years, or 2 at the very least.
Folks, this sound... This sound, yes, signifies that I am now turning the voicemail off on our phone system, and therefore we'll be accepting your phone calls if you would like to be a participant or a on-air participant, I should say, on this program. 646-257-3920 is the number.
Here's a question. Should the next Democratic president do that to, say, a Florida right-wing governor? Say, hey, you want help with this stuff? Are you going to keep denying climate change? Are you going to put laws in place that say you can't discuss it?
I mean, that might have been, it might have been worthwhile for Joe Biden to have said, like, look, but I would like to ask Governor DeSantis. I would like to meet him and hand him this check that I have here for $1 billion.
Climate change relief.
Can you please just allow the use of climate change in your... the idea that Democrats not even take that opportunity to make the point. Never mind, go out there and, test balloon weather conditions.
He didn't have the capacity. It's not what Democrats do.
I'm talking about future Democrats, though.
But,
Can any of them have that capacity?
Oh, here.
Even Obama, I'm sorry, but Obama...
Joe Biden doing it. Hello.
Biden is bragging. I understand that this is the standard amount for relief from I think, FEMA. The $770 that are going to go to the members, to people in California who lost their homes. But... why is he bragging on the bully pulpit about how it's a one-time payment or emphasizing it all. Why was Obama going on the campaign trail during the, Kamala Harris campaign and bragging about how Biden didn't sign the checks that were sent out for the stimulus? Like, why are you bragging about not advertising the things that you do? It's insane. It's for donors, right? Because they're very serious and fiscally responsible. And we're not giving out too much money to the poors, but it's like bad politics. Yep. Trump signing those checks, people associate the stimulus checks with him still, more than Biden. And why is that? It's because we live in an information age where you need to use the bully pulpit, and we elected the exact wrong person during COVID who could not do that based on his constitution and clearly based on his limited mental capacity at his age. I mean, that Wall Street Journal article about how they were afraid that Jill Biden was overshadowing him on the campaign trail in 2019 should have been a red flag that perhaps this man shouldn't run again. Whatever. Broken record. Sorry.
I am conservative mind virus. When you talked about Social Security last week, was there a reason you weren't deploying the additional argument that with the amount of funds you'd raise by raising the cap would allow us to increase benefits or lower retirement age? I'm not sure about that. It would be a function of how long you would want the fund to be solvent and not, but B, we're in a defensive posture now. I mean, this is a different ball game. And when we deploy these arguments, it is why you don't touch it. That's my argument. There is no opportunity for Democrats to increase Social Security benefits right now. This is a binary situation. Keep Social Security from being cut right now, anyways, or not. But also, I'm not convinced of your assertion there. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam and Emma. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, sir? Is this the first time we've talked to you in the new year?
Yes, it is. Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Okay. Hearing from all our regs.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Promoting your appearance on some other show?
No, I'm not. This is just for you, Sam.
All right. I love it. Go ahead.
Exclusive.
Damn it.
Yeah, I have some different opinions about Sam and Michael Porthoser's analysis of the last election. I'm going to start with a point of agreement. When you talk about elections, you often say there are a number of reasons why a candidate won or lost. I'd like to put an approximate percentage on those reasons, which is hard to do. For example, the main reason why candidates win is party loyalty. This is one reason why only 3 states have Senate representation from both parties, while in the past the number has been much larger. My major criticism of Sam and Porthoser's perspective is not based on how a candidate wins the presidential election in America, which is winning the Electoral College. Instead, it's based on the false metric of the popular vote. Sam has referenced the small amount of votes that candidates in 2016 and 2020 won by in the closest states that could have flipped the Electoral College the other way to the other major party candidate. In 2016, Trump won by 77,744 votes in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. In 2020, Biden won by 42,918 votes in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Another point of disagreement is the way Sam and Porter.
Okay, wait. Okay, I'm sorry. So I let me just, I got distracted here, John, because people don't know who Porthorser is or what you're talking about, what you're refuting. And that is, Porthorser's argument is this, is that the number of votes that went from Biden to Trump, popular vote, Biden to Trump, was more or less equal to the number of votes that went from Trump to Harris. So that was sort of a wash. And that Trump won the same percentage of the potential electorate, which I presume was defined by somebody who has voted within the past 2 elections or 3 elections. But Harris did not. And so his assertion is there was about 19 million people, and we're accounting for the growth in population and the growth in the specific cohorts that voted for Biden, did not show up. Now, you seem already agitated by what I'm saying. I haven't made it. I'm just explaining, right? That's his argument, and the one that you're attributing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're misrepresenting what he said, but I mean, I don't agree with what he said. The 19 million number comes from, let me see, I actually wrote it down later in the call. The 19 number keeps referencing from people who voted in 2024, 40% voted for Biden in 2020, and 40% voted for Trump. And so what he did was take that 81 million that voted for Biden and put that, well, no, it's the total number of votes, rather. It's 155 million votes, and subtracted 19 million, and that's how it got to 62 million. But the problem with that, with doing that, is that, Harris picked up also votes from people who didn't vote in 2020, which this is all according to a vote cast post-election poll, and this is run by the AP. And so bottom line is Harris, just going by those numbers, actually got about 1 million votes more than she actually received, which were 75 million votes. And so I know you keep referencing this, but I mean, if you look at it, Trump got the same number of votes. And are you going to do the same thing with him? Are you going to subtract 19 million from 74 million?
No.
Because when you do, well, why not?
Because
why not? It says
no, I'm
got
not
40
subtracting.
apiece.
I'm not actually following what you're saying, to be honest with you. The
Okay.
Porthorster's argument is that if you account for the increase in population and you maintain and you account for how many people switched from Trump to from Biden to Trump and Trump to Harris, the reason why that it wasn't that Trump got more votes than he did last time. He got basically in line with the same votes that he had last time. Obviously increases, for population growth. But that Harris, something like 19 million voters that should have come out to vote, didn't, because they weren't motivated by negative partisanship, or they weren't inspired by whatever things. But if Harris had performed the way that, so it wasn't that people switched their votes in any significant numbers. You didn't have a lot of people going from Biden to Trump. It was more just like people who voted for Biden just didn't come out this time.
No, I think what you're misrepresenting what he actually says. I mean, I don't want to go over it again, because I just did. But what he actually said is they had these people who actually voted. Go ahead. People can look on the first footnote in the January 4th. This is what he talks about, and 40% of the people who voted for both Biden and Harris, or who voted for Harris, or voted in the 2024 election, also 40% voted for Biden, 40% voted for Trump. So there's no difference in that. You're misinterpreting what Porthorster is saying, is what I'm saying to you. And I mean, I don't want to keep arguing about this, but I mean, at one point, Todd Horser, doesn't give any number about the increase, but I do have that number nationally, even though the national numbers are not relevant, because that's not how you win an election. But that number is 4,038,457. Now, my point is that what I talked about on every Tuesday's call was you win elections by winning in swing states. And that's, and if Harris would have won in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, she would have won. In Pennsylvania, they actually lost eligible voters, 45,757 eligible voters. They had less voters in 2024 than 2020. This goes along with, Pennsylvania losing a congressional seat and an electoral vote. Michigan gained 30,156 new voters. Wisconsin gained 74,044. So you're talking about increases, a decrease in Pennsylvania, about a half a point in Michigan, and about 1.5 points in Wisconsin. And so the numbers are incredibly small. And what you're saying about Trump.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm going to read from the second paragraph of what Port Hortzer wrote. And he wrote this on January 4th. As this post will show, the results are best understood as a vote of no confidence in Democrats, not an embrace of Trump or MAGA. And then the bullet points. The popular vote result was almost entirely a collapse in support for Harris and Democrats, not an increase in support for Trump and MAGA. Most of Harris's losses were due to anti-MAGA surge voters staying home. Anti-MAGA surge voters stayed home because they were less alarmed by a second Trump administration than they were 4 years ago. So that's first of all what he's saying. I think the idea is, yes, obviously, it's an electoral college. But the idea is that you can extrapolate from what's happening, broadly speaking, across the electorate. Maybe not the exact same dynamic, because you might be less alarmed in New York or California than you are in Pennsylvania or in Wisconsin or in Arizona or Nevada or Georgia or Michigan. But we also know those swing states were a little bit closer. So we see that reflected there. When you talk about there were more raw vote totals in those states than there were in 2024, are you accounting, and like you say, very slim majorities in 2024, also 2020, very slim majorities in 2016 that went the other way. Are you accounting for what just simply the increase in the pool of eligible voters? Like, we're talking about vote share of eligible voters in those states. And I think what you would find is that the vote share of eligible voters did not come out. We just didn't see, because the share of eligible voters also increases over those years.
Yeah, no, they are out. They are out. Michael McDonald, who is, very renowned poli-sci professor at the University of Florida, runs the University of Florida Election Lab. He also, before he had a website called... Okay, well, I mean, I just gave you those numbers. Pennsylvania actually lost voter share.
But what's your central thesis, John? I'm still unclear as to what issue.
Here's my central thesis. This was a high turnout election. What I hear from Sam and Pod Horser is, you're not saying it directly, but the theme that you're getting was that people didn't turn out. I hear it over and over and over, and they did turn out. It was the tied for the second most highest election at 63.88 since the 19th Amendment was put into place. It gave women the right to vote in 1920. The only one, like I said, it was tied with 1960 election. The only one that was higher was 2020, which was 2.5% higher. So what my point is that it was a high turnout election, and how can you keep saying that a bunch of people on the Democrat side didn't turn out? Trump basically got the same number of votes. Well, if that's the case, how can it be the second highest turnout election tied to
because the one he lost was the
1920?
highest turnout election.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. But I mean, you're not really talking about this historically. Anytime
you don't think, but wait a second. From 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024, we have all had historically high turnout. Correct? Like that
2020
far and away relative to what it was prior to 2018.
Yeah, okay. That's true.
So my thesis
except
is,
for 2022, the 1970 election was higher. But yeah, that's still going back a ways.
Yeah.
52 years, yes.
Yeah. So I guess my point is that yes, this was a high election relative to 2004 or 1993, 1992,
or any other election besides 1960,
except for 2020, when the last time a Democrat won.
Right, 2020 and 1960, and it was tied with 1960.
Yeah, but John, my point is that they had a perfect example of what the threat that Donald Trump represented to this country. And it was an all hands on deck type of situation. We didn't see Donald Trump amass more voters. That's the issue. The bottom line was.
Well, he did, though. He did. That's one of I feel terrible even talking about this because, I'm dreading Trump.
How many people went from Biden to Trump?
Well, according to that Vote Act, it was 4%. The same amount that went from Biden to
Trump.
Biden to Trump also went from Trump to Harris.
Yes.
But
so John, what happened in this election was that the people who switched who they were going to vote for, the crossover voters, canceled each other out. And Trump maintained his percentage of the electorate that he had in 2020, and Harris underperformed where Biden did.
Well, actually, if you actually look at what it says, the two major factors why Trump, because everything he's talking about is talking about a false metric, the national election vote. And so there's about 1.2 million came from people who voted originally in 2020 for Biden, and then went to
what's different Tell me what's different in the swing states.
The difference was that Trump got. Trump got like 170 or 165 or 87,000 more votes, and that's all he needed. That's all he needed because the margins were still low. That he only won Wisconsin by 29,000 votes. He won by like 80,000.
Okay, but I know that. I can tell that from looking at the vote tallies.
Right.
But what's the point?
Right.
What happened?
The point is,
I know that he got more votes.
I feel you're miscategorizing. I disagree completely with what Podhorser is saying. I think that people should realize that it was a historically high turnout election, that Trump did do well, that Republicans
Did Trump outperform in Wisconsin, outperform Harris in terms of voters who voted for the other for the other party in 2020 in Wisconsin?
I don't have those numbers, but I do have.
Did Trump get a bigger share?
I think it's irrelevant. I think it's an irrelevant metric.
Okay. Did Trump get a bigger share?
I will say one thing.
John, we've been talking for 10 minutes, and I don't understand what the point you're trying to make is. No, we've been talking for 20 minutes. Did Trump get a bigger share in Wisconsin than he did in 2020? Bigger share. Not of the vote tally, but the bigger share of the eligible voters.
I would think he would, but I do have the number. I don't know because I think it's a waste of time, but I do have the 2024 Pennsylvania total, and that's basically, all it's going to do is make everything look closer. So that we know that Trump won by 1.7% in Pennsylvania. Now, if you go by the 3D thing that Ford Horser
Okay,
said,
you know what, John?
it's
I
about
honestly
6.6%.
I don't. None of this. We're talking past each other. I'm not sure what the point is. What's the lesson? Sum up the lesson
I
for
told
me.
you I would tell people that this was a historically high turnout election. I would say that Trump did get several 100,000 more votes in the swing states that it mattered the most, and that's why he won the election. And that's
But John,
really
all
kind of
you've just told me is that Trump won. Trump won the election because he got more votes. And I'm trying to establish. Did he get more votes because people decided I don't like what the Democrats are doing, so now I'm going to vote for Trump? Or did he get more, excuse me, let me finish. Or did he get more votes because the people who voted for the Democrat last time were not inspired to come out and vote? That's the only question that's relevant. I can look at the vote tallies and know that Donald Trump got more votes in 7 swing states. I know that Donald Trump got more votes in the popular vote. The question is, did Donald Trump convince new voters that were fundamentally sort of unreachable to him in 2020, or a significant amount of those new voters that it made a difference? And the answer, I think, is no. And whether you want to talk about, it's just the electoral states or not, that's secondary.
No, that's the whole point. Nobody who runs a campaign, what Jayapal just said was ridiculous about we should have campaigned in the other 7 states. I mean, Democrats won all those other states that everybody thought they were going to win.
Okay, all right. So John, all right.
But
listen,
okay,
John. All I'm hearing you say is that you cannot make an assessment as to how people act in Wisconsin. The way that people act in upstate New York, for instance. You're saying they're completely different animals.
Yeah, of course they are. But what I'm saying is that what I said on the December 18th call, which was in all 3 swing states that I keep talking about, percentage turnout was higher. It was not lower. It was higher in all of those states.
You haven't told me the one thing that's relevant to this conversation is relative to eligible voters.
I can tell you what you're looking for, what you feel is relevant, which I feel is not relevant, and those numbers will differ between about a half a point to a point. And that's what can swing an election.
John,
yes,
what's
that's
the lesson
true.
then that we're getting incorrect about a future election?
I got to stop. We're going to have to do this on a different day. 21 minutes, and I don't feel like I understand anything. This may be my problem. I apologize, John.
Well, bottom line is a high turnout election. Turnout was higher in the most important swing states, and I don't agree with Trump did win more, had many more votes than he did, and that's why he won. And turnout was not bad in the
So you dispute the contention that Trump got the same percentage of eligible voters as he did in 2020?
I don't have the exact numbers, but I do
saying
know
back
that
to you
it's
what
like
you're
between
telling me.
half a point. It's about a half a point to maximum 2-point difference.
But doesn't that explain the difference in the rate when you take a half a point and 2-point difference of several million people? We're at the margin of victory.
Right. Biden's margin of victory in 2020 was just like a handful of tens of thousands of voters across those 3 swing states that he needed.
All right, I got to go. We'll take this up another day when we both go back to our various corners and figure out what each other were saying. But I appreciate the call.
Thank you.
I don't know how I managed to talk to him for 20 minutes and didn't understand anything.
It can both be a relatively high turnout election, and they could have also left turnout on the table.
Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, you have to measure it to 2020 because that's the last time that Donald Trump lost.
I don't know why we're acting like 1960 and 2020 are like the same thing. 2020 is the clear model to run off of this election.
Right.
If
she failed and Biden failed her.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I guess it's in comparison to if he was making the point about 2016, but that's not what we were comparing it to. We were comparing it to the most recent election. Yeah.
And like that she did better in certain areas. Like she had $1 billion. I would hope that turnout would improve
in the swing states where they hyper targeted,
All
right? It mitigated some of the damage in those swing states, but it was going to be it was a bad election for the Democrats.
Calling from a 319 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yes. Is this John from
Yeah,
San Antonio?
I'm
Did
calling
you call
from
back?
Iowa.
Okay. Who is it?
Jax from Iowa.
Jax from Iowa. You're, I think, going to be the final caller of the day. I'm sorry, folks. We went a little bit longer than the last one. We got a couple of clips I want to get to. All right. Jax from Iowa. Where? What? I'm confused.
Yeah. No, I'm calling from Iowa.
Okay, Jax from Iowa. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I recently watched a video on YouTube that said that political parties or the political spectrum doesn't matter because people on the right have some left-leaning views and people on the left have some right-leaning views. I don't think that argument is appropriate. He said that political spectrum, like left and right, is just a modern concept. And I just really don't agree with him. I wanted to get your thoughts on it because it's kind of I've been picking at my brain.
Well, I haven't seen the video. Look, there's always going to be overlapping, on specific issues, right? Like you can find, leftists who have a robust reading of the Second Amendment, I guess, and, right wing, and sometimes what happens is different ideologies will adopt certain positions that don't necessarily encumber their primary ideological aims, and therefore they find to be helpful in terms of elections. We see this on the right in this country quite a bit. The bottom line is they want to amass as much wealth as possible in the Republican Party, and they will throw some culture warrior issues into the fray. And that's the way they will do it. But I think broadly speaking, ideology matters. And I do think that like you can have populist strains in the right. I mean, right-wing populism certainly exists. It's authoritarian. It is very often at the expense of some type of other or outsider. It either, expresses itself through nativism or xenophobia or racism. And generally that populism is limited to a specific group within society who get those things. Left-wing populism is more associated with like socialism, with broader emancipation, more democracy. That necessarily is both a means and an end within the context of left-wing ideology. So, I think more often than not, in a very nuanced, situation, you could say that. We've had Jeet here on made the argument that our politics have become more about inside versus outside. And on some level, from an electoral standpoint, that is the case. But part of that is because the institutionalism that we've gotten from Democrats has been blind to what the institutions have been doing for an extended period of time. And so there are certainly moments where I think there can be sort of like a blurring of the lines, but beware of politics that are about anti-establishmentarianism, if you will, that are divorced from ideology. Because once you throw out the boss, who becomes the next boss?
Exactly.
Not literally, is very, very important. And if you're not grounded in an ideology, that next boss could be very, very bad.
Yeah. And also, establishment can be extremely fluidly defined, right? Donald Trump is a part of the establishment. Donald Trump is a rich guy that has gamed the system over and over again to escape things like multiple bankruptcies, and he's come out on top because the rules are stacked in his favor. But he's not seen as establishment because he pisses off people in Washington. I would argue that he's a part of the establishment, but someone else making that argument may not make that argument. And so then how do you define what establishment is if it's that fluid? Because frankly, it's just like a branding exercise to appeal to the broadest audience, because it can be in anything. And we saw this with Jimmy Dore. The point is that you have to first have an ideology of like what you want to do when you get power, and then you can critique the establishment as we do. Like what our focus should be, I think, in terms of pushing the Democrats to the left and as leftists, like decommodifying the essentials of life. This is the kind of thing that I want to push forward in the next few years. Housing, healthcare, making it easier for people to have fulfilling, happy lives without being crushed by the weight of capitalism. And that is the focus, not just like daddy's pissing me off, so I'm going to rebel against him and get a nose piercing. Like that's anti-establishment politics.
Well, let me just add a fine point to this, because we hear from people like, there's a duopoly. And yet there's an establishment within the different political parties, right? Like there are people who are gatekeepers within both of these parties. But when people say like it's a duopoly, on some level, like there is definitely overlap in those two Venn diagrams. But where that overlap is with rich people.
Yes.
And corporations. And so the idea that Donald Trump could say like, well, he may be against the establishment of the Republican Party, but at the end of the day, there's a reason why he contributed to both when he wasn't running as a candidate. And they were both giving him favors, is because money at the end of the day in our society is the establishment. That is where the power lies. Corporate and individual wealth is where the power lies in our society. And so you can have different parties with different establishments in them. There could be an establishment in local politics up in Poughkeepsie. But they're not the establishment that we have to worry about.
Right. If
you're in Poughkeepsie and you're trying to get into the local politics, yeah, you maybe the old boy network might be what you want to get into. But it is, like Emma says, it's not as much like it applies to the context, and what she's talking about is really important when you use that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it should be class politics, not partisan politics.
Did I answer that?
You did. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Also, left-right comes from the French Revolution, so I guess technically modern. I guess that's part of the
freedom fries. Freedom fries.
And speaking of the French Revolution, we have levels of income inequality that match that right now. The pre-French Revolution days. Just saw that the other day.
Yeah, left right doesn't make as much sense to me as capitalist versus labor.
Joanne in Massachusetts says, say ruling class. Okay, fair.
To capital.
That sound signals the immense disappointment I have that we cannot take any further phone calls, because we got a couple of clips I want to get to before we finish here that are really important, I think. Which one is... let's talk about this. This Israeli ceasefire deal. It is quite clear that Joe Biden did not have a situation where he couldn't influence the Israelis to push them to a ceasefire. It is quite clear that Joe Biden never exercised any of the tools at his disposal to influence the Israelis. The Leahy Law, other laws, U.S. laws on the books that says, based upon Israeli actions, we could stop funding, providing them offensive weapons or any type of weapons, or just unilaterally deciding to do that. We had State Department officials quit over the fact that it was clear the State Department was ignoring specialists on this. Like, the evidence is impossible to ignore that Joe Biden You want to argue that, well, even if he had done those things, the Israelis would have kept going? That's a theoretical argument. The one reality we know is that Joe Biden never pressed and used his resources in the way that Reagan had, let's say, with Menachem Begin, et cetera, et cetera. We also know that Kamala Harris did not publicly break with Joe Biden. I speculated during the run-up to the election based upon who her foreign policy advisors were, as opposed to McGurk and Hochstein, who are, I think Hochstein's literally an Israeli.
Used to be in the IDF, yeah.
That her top national security advisor, Phil Gordon, who had been Obama's and worked on the Iran nuclear deal, was going to signal a change in policy. We don't know. We also said during the election that when Miriam Adelson, sometime I think it was over the course of the summer, put out her demand to give Donald Trump over $100 million. She personally gave him $100 million for his campaign, and then had a network that provided tens of millions of dollars more.
Did a fundraiser for Just Israel at his golf course in Bedminster around the summer, which was, by the way, around the time that Netanyahu did his little jaunt down to Mar-a-Lago, and there was a conversation, multiple seemingly probably conversations between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, which I think are relevant with the timing of this news.
Oh, absolutely. And we heard her say, like, last time, Sheldon and I, her late husband, we asked for Donald Trump. We said, we want the we
Golan
want
Heights?
We want the embassy in Jerusalem, and he gave it to us. And then as a bonus, we never even asked. He gave us the Golan Heights.
Exactly.
And she uses we. I think she's also an Israeli citizen as well, American and Israeli citizen. And so we speculated at the time, as Donald Trump was saying, like, the day that I get into office, Hamas will cease fire. And of course, everyone who follows this with any modicum of objectivity knows that the reason why a deal has not been struck for any ceasefire during the course of this is because Israel has refused to do it. They have moved the goalpost multiple times. Biden tried to hem Netanyahu in by announcing this at one point, that it was the Israeli proposal. And then Netanyahu turned around and said, like, well, we reject it.
Ben-Gvir was bragging today about how many ceasefire agreements they blocked, while the entire time the administration publicly was saying that it was Hamas that was the obstacle.
Well,
so they were lying to not use cut off arms at all, but still hoping a ceasefire would happen, but not doing any of the steps to actually get a ceasefire.
Ben-Gvir is saying that they're still going to try to fight this one, and looks like if Trump's going to be the one to say, no, we're actually going to push this through, it doesn't look good for Biden.
Definitely
it doesn't look good for Biden. It doesn't look good for Biden, period. Because I think, like, you start with the baseline. I think it's like incontrovertible that Biden never exercised the tools that were at his disposal to end this. I don't think he wanted to dictate whether it be ended, period. And Donald Trump, I think, he wants the ceasefire there. And I think the deal is, this is how you're going to get the West Bank. We're going to annex the West Bank. Now,
and Netanyahu needed a way out too.
It is, and I offer this without an assessment as to whether it's worth it. It's certainly, for the slaughter that's going on, you want to stop the slaughter is the first thing that you want to do, in my estimation. But I think a lot of this that we're hearing from the Netanyahu government, that their hands are tied with the Trump, is exactly what they would have said if Biden had exercised any of this. But this is part of the KFAB, in my estimation. But here is a scroll up just so that we can, Netanyahu's chief proponent on Channel 14, Errol Siegel. And here we go. This is, and I'm going to read the subtitles. When Trump was elected, what was I doing here? I was wrong in thinking that the first to pay the price for his election would be the Ukrainians. It might be that we are the first to pay the price for Trump's election. Because in this deal, I don't want to say we're trying to get into it. I wouldn't meddle in it, and I don't know all the details, so I'll be more cautious, etc. But I don't think this is what we planned and what we expected. We thought we were talking about other things. We thought we would take control of the northern strip, that's of Gaza. They would allow us to prevent aid from entering these areas. Thus we would impose pressure on Hamas. What is happening? And we need to tell the truth to the viewers. If 1 million Gazans return to the northern strip, the IDF will not return to fight in the northern strip. We won't redo this whole event. And remove 1 million people from there. It's not going to happen. He's lamenting. We need to tell the truth. It might be that they will remain in parts in the Philadelphia perimeter, etc. But 1 million people returning to the northern strip ends the story. And another thing.
So we slowed that down a bit so we could read the captions.
But the bottom line is you're starting to hear Israelis complain and attribute this to Trump. Haaretz reported that Trump's would-be or soon-to-be ambassador to Israel got very rough with Netanyahu. They said, we can't talk to you right now. It's Shabbat. And he goes, I don't care about Shabbat.
Mike Huckabee?
No,
some other guy. Huckabee would never.
It was
Steve Witkoff. He's the envoy.
He's the envoy. I'm sorry, I said ambassador, but literally envoy. This Jew who doesn't care about Shabbat, doesn't recognize Shabbat in Israel. Okay, and I don't care about Shabbat. You better do this, or Donald Trump's going to be mad. And that's the story that we're getting. And there is no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump wanted this win. It is a win for him. And at the very least, in the short term, it is a win for Gazans if Israel is not able to stop aid and is forced to stop bombing, without a doubt. But I think we don't need more proof that Joe Biden was not interested in keeping the Israelis from stopping. And B, I suspect that Joe Biden was not going to sign off on the annexation of the West Bank. Other people can make an assessment as to whether that's a trade that's worth making. But I think within a year of Donald Trump being president, I don't know, we could look back on when the Jerusalem move happened. I think that happened in the first 16 months of his presidency last time. Will you look that up? I suspect we're going to see Israel annex the West Bank. And the U.S. signing off on it.
The reality is just that I pray that this is real and that there's some relief for people in Gaza who've been experiencing a genocide and whose lives will be forever ruined by the trauma that they've seen if they do survive. I hope that Donald Trump and the Israeli government allow independent journalists to go in and verify the true death tolls, because we know that it's been undercounted by at minimum 41% of the figures that we have, but it's likely higher than that based on the study published in The Lancet that came out last week. But I also think we need to start talking about Biden's mental capacity and as it relates to this. Like, at the very least, he should have understood that he was getting humiliated. Like, he lived through Nixon conspiring to undercut talks that LBJ was having during Vietnam. He was a senator during the Iran hostage crisis, where Carter's hostage negotiations were sabotaged by a back deal with Reagan during an election year. Reagan won. And then on the day of his inauguration, the hostages were released. And that was like a similar 400 plus days around a very similar timetable to this.
I feel like it was like 5:35. I remember when
the headline said 4:44. I saw last night I went to the New York Times archive to look this up. And this is Trump met with Netanyahu in July. We have the photos. The ceasefire was allegedly reached a week before Trump's inauguration, which was as predictable as possible. And at the end of the day, like, I don't want people to take this as if this is like a an excuse for Biden or for Harris or whatever. No, it's an indictment on the fact that even they should have known that this was the political reality just for their own ass, just for their own self-interest, specifically Biden. And that's where we go back to some of the reporting about it's just Hochstein and McGurk and Sullivan running this damn show because it's like West exec.
Dad's taking they've gone to the Bahamas for like a month and a half. We own the house.
It feels rudderless because it probably is, and run by Zionists and national security, establishment, to use that word, stalwarts who wanted to push through their agenda because this is like the think tank environment here in the United States. It's very Zionist.
You mentioned Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter didn't want to hear more about what happened to cost him that election. And this is a broader problem with Democrats. And the whole thing about them appearing weak and people thinking, well, look at all this war stuff going on. Let's get a strongman in. They just confirmed that stuff. Yeah. And all this stuff, and there might be disclosures and reporting that comes out later that mitigates it and, or Israel's actions like in the West Bank. But my problem is I don't have confidence that if Harris would have won, she would have been able to put brakes on them. I think that the West Bank might have been annexed under the first woman president if she had won. And so, what's the difference? The difference is a ceasefire was secured before he was inaugurated. And I don't know that would have happened had Harris won. And that is catastrophic. And which is not even to mention the other thing that guy mentioned, which is Ukraine. And I think that's also Trump is saying we need to start enlisting 18-year-olds or what, not enlisting, forcing to fight. But the Dems have abandoned, and it goes to the top of the show, the USS George W. Bush and stuff. This is, they've tried to win the military party thing, and I think it's going to be a Pyrrhic victory.
No, it's been a disaster.
Yeah, and we were saying this to Representative Jayapal. I came into politics animated about voting for Obama and the Democrats because I hated the Iraq War so much. What has Biden done in terms of not just destroying the liberal international order? We're seeing liberalism kind of falling apart before our very eyes. Claudia Sheinbaum down in Mexico has an 80% approval rating and is bragging about how we begin by uplifting the poor, and then you have the Democrats collapsing and Trudeau having to resign up north. This is a failure of this kind of political philosophy, and I'm hoping that in the end there's some changes made, but I don't know.
All right. Do we have time for? Yeah, we got time for.
Oh, and can I say one more thing about this?
Yeah.
For all of Trump's faults, and it is endless. He's a psycho and one of the most selfish people ever to be born. He's at least a transactional politician. And to Matt's point about validating the strongman thing, he cares about the PR of the dead kids, right? Just that's what he was saying at the time. Just get it done and get it over with. At the very least, he shows a level of responsiveness that I think we shouldn't dismiss, because again, the Biden administration didn't listen to the overwhelming calls to get him to step aside for a new nominee, which did not demonstrate Democratic responsiveness. And again, this is before Harris, to have a real primary. And he also, despite his base screaming at him and the rest of the country saying, what is this? Why are we funding this genocide? He didn't show responsiveness on that either. So there is a level of just the calcification within the Democratic Party is really harming the good and undercutting the good things that the Biden administration did, and is leading us towards a fascist presidency in Donald Trump. Potentially.
Since we're piling on too, it is astonishing to me that the only time we ever hear from Barack Obama and he exercises any type of political power seems to be to basically stop the left from ascending. Obama seems to me to have been the person who could have gotten Biden to step aside.
Yep.
I get it. It's time consuming. You got to go. You got to pitch. You got to go. You got your Netflix deal, and you got to pitch, and you got to meet with producers. And I've been there.
Yep.
I've been there. It's exhausting. And the idea of stepping in and saving the country from
It's a lot to
from
chew
Donald
on.
Trump.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate the fact that he could be, he's not going to let that get in the way of perhaps, maybe having some type of marginal impact on Donald Trump in the White House. I mean, that's the thing that really, really drives me crazy is the absolute hubris and arrogance that Obama displays in terms of his ability to personally sort of like change things. I just remember in the run up to the 2010 elections where he just basically went into a caucus meeting with Democrats in the House and the Senate and like, I got this. And it turned out he did not got this. He maintained his position. We lost 1,000 Democratic office holders across the country. That's why we had this sort of dearth for years of like, wait, where's our bench in this? Why is the guy, mayor from Indianapolis, like an actual choice in this election? Because there was no other state officials. Do we even have any governors that ran that year?
Yeah.
In 2020, do we even have any governors? Like,
no.
What like why is that? Is because in 2010 and in 2012 and in 2014 and in 2016 the Obama administration had so undermined any outside organizing and had so refused to provide any sort of like use any of their political cachet to create an environment for Democrats that like Secretary of State in 2010 loses, some Democrat in like half a dozen states, that state senators lose. They can't go on to become governor. And that's basically it. So,
Yep. And it's ideological for Obama. It's part of why he was okay with that Citigroup list for his cabinet officials. He genuinely, I think, believes in like individual,
we need to capitalize bankers and you folks. It'd be nice if we could help you, but it's just not efficient.
He's like a believer in bootstraps and like and his own kind of individual power. He's not a collectivist politician.
Let's play this just to wrap up the show. Okay. Which one do we like? 10 or 11? Let's do a 10. We can do 11 later. There are moments in television where people get on TV and people are sort of like, wait, what's this guy doing here? Maybe we shouldn't be pushing this. And this guy is on a panel on Morning Joe where it's the, it's the usual suspects. I don't know everybody there. I don't know who that first white guy on the bottom is, but I think that's Eugene Robinson and Stan Stein, and I don't know who that woman is. And then this other guy is Scott Galloway, and he is a professor at NYU Business School. So things have gotten pretty bad. He does, I think, like a podcast with Kara Swisher called The Pivot. And so things are bad when the business school people are going like, and to be fair, like we've had some great business school people on. I'm thinking of oh shoot, I can't remember his name now, from UMass, who talked about the implications of he's no longer there, but who talked about the implications of things like share buyback and capital gains. But here is the Scott Galloway just sort of basically saying something that is, yes, completely accurate.
Once you get above a certain level of wealth, you get no incremental happiness. So why on earth would you not go back to a tax policy of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where say above, pick a big number, 10 million, you actually pay more than 10%, maybe more than 20%, maybe more than 50%, because the difference between 30,000 a year for a household and 50,000 is enormous to the well-being of that household. Low-income kids in low-income households have higher resting blood pressure, but the difference between making 10 million a year and 15 million a year offers you no happiness. But these individuals have weaponized government, and we risk revolution, whether it's CEOs being murdered in the street, whether it's a Me Too movement that had righteous components of it, or Black Lives Matter. What are these movements? They are targeting the wealthy. We are in the midst of a series of small revolutions to correct income inequality. And the reason we put an insurrectionist and a rapist in office is because for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. Why? Because the majority of households are having the oxygen sucked out of the room, such that a small number of individuals and a small number of companies can be worth more than nation states. Income inequality is out of control. Our tax policy has gone full oligarch.
Now, look.
Oh.
He's a little bit more polite. Like, I don't care if it really makes you a little marginally more happy to be a multi-billionaire or millionaire. I still don't think it's effective for society. I don't think it's like, putting aside like any type of morality associated with it. It's just, like he says, this is a math problem.
Yeah, it's inefficient.
And the math problem is, this is unsustainable. You cannot have a small group of corporations and individuals hoarding all the money in society. You can't have it and have society function. This is the situation we're in. Now, I will also say that when I said this on what's his face, PDB, Patrick Bet-David show, Joe Rogan said this was insane. Maybe you should have this professor on to explain him. Maybe he'll appreciate it if it's somebody who has a business degree.
Yeah, doubtful.
But when the business professors, not the sociology, not even like the economics professor, but when the business professor says like, this is, it's not good for business? People hunting down business people.
The guy Gordon Gekko was based on in 2016 endorsed Bernie because of velocity of money, a standard concept in economics, which is that people lower income are going to spend it faster than people that, like, we talked about this in the...
Well, but when you finish that, what velocity of money is, because...
You're going to spend more money and you're going to recycle it into your local economy.
If you give somebody who makes $30,000 a year, or even $60,000 a year, maybe even $90,000 a year in a four-person household, if you give them an extra $100, they're not going to go and take that money and invest it or put it in some investment that's not going to do anything. They're going to take that money and they're going to go spend it. They're going to spend it on their electrical bill. They're going to spend it on their education. They're going to spend it on somewhere. And when they spend it in that place, the people who get that money, they go spend it at the grocery store. They turn around, they spend the money. Yep. And the money travels through the economy. When you give it to a millionaire, you give it to a billionaire, or you give it to someone who's making that kind of money, they don't go out and spend it. They don't have to, because they've got so many dollars that are in line to spend before that. They go and put it in, like, I'm going to buy crypto.
Yep.
I'm going to go buy tulips. I'm going to go buy, whatever, this piece of art that's going to accrue in value. I'm going to go...
Or I didn't even know what to buy, because we have this thing in private equity we keep talking about. Private equity dry powder growth accelerated in H1 2024. If you don't know what dry powder is, all these companies like BlackRock that own these houses and make all these investments in like infrastructure and hospitals and stuff, they cannot find places to invest all the money that the rich people are giving them to invest. They run out of it. So of course it's going to go into crypto. It's going to go into all this dumb stuff because they have too much money than they know what to do with. That's why, what's his name? Bezos said, I don't know what to do with all this money,
go to Mars.
Go to Mars.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, this is the bottom line. And the way that you decrease income inequality and wealth inequality, there's only one way to do it. And that's essentially to tax these people at a higher rate.
Right.
And this is why we keep saying, and the number is not pulled out of my ass, it's just a number that we've done in the past. In the 1950s, I want you to Google historical tax rates in this country. In the 1950s and into the 60s, changed under JFK. They dropped it about 20 points, but closed some loopholes, supposedly. Every dollar that you would make over about $470,000, which would be $3 million in today's money, was taxed. Every dollar above that was taxed. For every dollar that you got above $470,000, 90 cents of that would go to the government. And so today that would be every dollar you make over $3 million any given year, 90 cents of that dollar goes to the government. Now, your libertarian friends are going to go, that's absurd. First off, Sam doesn't know what he's talking about because he's talking about the tax rates, but the effective rate was much lower than that at that time. The effective rate is what happens when you have a tax rate and then you start to apply like deductions and whatnot. Well, first of all, we are nowhere close to a 50% effective tax rate, which it was in those times. And if we, whatever it takes us to get to an effective tax rate of 50%, because right now for people who make that kind of money, it's like south of 20%. And that's just like in the way you can measure before, there's like far more sophistication to get around that. If we had anything close to a 50% effective tax rate, that would be a great place to start. The bottom line is the most important function of taxation at the end of the day, because we've shown that we can spend without actually having the money. And we just sent $8 billion to Israel, and we don't, we've never turned off the faucet to anybody when it's a priority for us. The most important function of taxation is to keep wealth inequality from growing. So you raise the personal income tax, you blow away the cap on Social Security and Medicare tax, you raise capital gains tax so that it is on par with wage tax. If you want to have a very small carve out for capital gains that are really about investing, long-term investing, not in stocks, but in like actual capitalization of things. We could have that conversation. There's no stock buybacks, but you need to change the compensation for a board of directors. They don't get paid, and the way you change that compensation structure and you don't have their pay tied to the stock is by raising capital gains tax on stuff like that. And then you could start to get wealth inequality under control. And then you also start to get political inequality under control. And then good things happen. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, at 2:53 p.m. on Tuesday, January 14th, we are done.
Wow.
Morpheus says Galloway has become
for good.
Well known as of late for Tuesday.
Yeah.
I went a little long.
It's okay.
PACs, the Obama effect you're discussing has downstream impacts in states too. In Massachusetts, one of the liberal bastions, the only viable Democrats for governor have to play to the center. There's seemingly no room to the run to the left of that Obama position, and he'll be around in our politics for a long time to come. Yes. Two more. Progressive Blob 2028, IATSE member who's been on the fire windstorm cleanups in LA already. Dems should take my lesson and learn to take credit for things they stumble into doing. Yes, Karen Bass could have come back quicker, but no one was going to stop these fires with current pre-made conditions. Rick Caruso says we will rebuild, meaning I will make more millions, and Newsom's going to cancel environmental standards on the rebuilding. Another nightmare in the making. The police should use their extra $125 billion of funds this year to be landscapers and preventive fire safety workers in between the few calls they would be useful for. Redirect the rest to better people better suited for non-violent incidents. Indeed. Two more. The anti-corporatists, Mehdi did an analysis and said that if the youth Muslim voters who stayed home because of Gaza had turned out, Harris would have won.
Mm.
And the final I am of the day. Ryan from Rochester, I'm not giving the Democratic Party any flowers for anything. You don't get flowers for doing your moral and ethical responsibility. That's a basic demand of your job. We hold people to being good people, point out that Republicans are being psychopathic compared to general humans. Don't allow that to lower the bar, so we're applauding Democrats for not being psychos from time to time. Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job today. Folks, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.